The antique vase shattered at my feet, its delicate porcelain fragments scattering across the hardwood floor. I stood frozen, my hand still outstretched from where I'd knocked it off the shelf. The silence that followed was deafening. "Mom, what have you done?" Sophie's shrill voice pierced the air, her eyes wide with horror. I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came out. How could I tell them it was an accident when they were looking at me like I was a criminal? Ethan, my husband of 20 years, rushed into the room, his face contorted with anger as he surveyed the scene. "Amanda, that was my mother's prized possession. How could you?" I didn't mean to," I stammered, finally finding my voice. "I was just dusting and—" "Save it," Ethan snapped, cutting me off. "You've always been jealous of my mother's things. Admit it, you did this on purpose." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What? No, of course not. It was an accident, I swear." Sophie scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Right, Mom. Just like it was an accident when you lost Grandma's pearl necklace last month?" My heart sank. That had been a genuine mistake, but now it was being used against me. I looked from my daughter to my husband, searching for any sign of understanding in their eyes. There was none. "I think you should leave," Ethan said, his voice cold and firm. "Leave? But this is my home," I protested, feeling panic rise in my chest. "Not anymore," he replied. "I want you out by tonight. We can't trust you around valuable things anymore." I turned to Sophie, hoping for support, but she just crossed her arms and looked away. My own daughter siding with her father against me. The betrayal stung worse than any physical pain. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where am I supposed to go?" Ethan shrugged, already turning away. "That's not my problem. Just get out of my sight." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Ethan went to answer it, leaving me alone with Sophie. "Sophie, honey, please," I pleaded. "You know I would never do something like this on purpose." She met my gaze, her eyes hard. "Do I? You've always resented Dad's success and Grandma's wealth. Maybe you finally snapped." Before I could respond, Ethan returned with a police officer in tow. My blood ran cold. "Officer, this is my wife," Ethan said, his voice dripping with false concern. "She's been acting erratically lately, destroying family heirlooms. We're worried about her mental state." The officer looked at me sympathetically. "Ma'am, is there someone we can call for you? Somewhere you can stay tonight?" I felt like I was in a nightmare. How had things spiraled so quickly? Just this morning, we'd been a normal family having breakfast together. Now, I was being treated like a criminal in my own home. I can call my sister," I managed to say, my voice shaking. As I fumbled for my phone, I caught sight of Ethan and Sophie exchanging a look. There was something in their eyes, something that made me wonder if this was more than just a misunderstanding. The officer escorted me to my room to pack a bag. As I threw clothes haphazardly into a suitcase, my mind raced. What was really going on here? Why were Ethan and Sophie so quick to turn on me? I paused, my hand on a framed photo of the three of us from happier times. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to find out what it was. They might think they've won, kicking me out like this, but they had no idea what I was capable of. As I walked out of the house I'd called home for 2 decades, I made a silent vow. I would uncover the truth, clear my name, and make them regret ever doubting me. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. I spent a restless night on Abby's couch, my mind racing with questions and doubts. The morning light had barely crept through the curtains when my phone buzzed. It was Sophie. "Mom, you need to come to Grandma's house, now." My heart leaped into my throat. "Is everything okay?" "Just come," she snapped before hanging up. I arrived at my mother-in-law's sprawling Victorian home within the hour, my stomach in knots. Ethan's car was already in the driveway. As I approached the front door, I heard raised voices inside. "I'm telling you, Mother, it was Amanda." Ethan's voice carried through the open window. "She's been eyeing your valuables for years." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. What was he doing? "But dear, Amanda's always been so kind," his mother Margaret replied. Her voice was frail, confused. "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure," Ethan insisted. "Why do you think she's not here now? She's probably pawning your things as we speak." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Anger surged through me as I burst through the door. "How dare you?" Ethan spun around, his face a mask of false concern. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" "Sophie called me," I said, glaring at him. "And I'm glad she did. What lies are you feeding your mother? Margaret looked between us, her eyes clouded with confusion. Ethan, you said Amanda stole from me? Because she did, Mother, Ethan said smoothly. Remember the missing pearl necklace and now the vase? That's not true, I protested. Margaret, you know me. I would never. Oh, Amanda, Margaret interrupted, her voice trembling. How could you, after all these years? My heart shattered. I turned to Sophie, who stood silently in the corner. Sophie, please, tell your grandmother the truth. But Sophie just looked away, avoiding my gaze. In that moment, I realized how deep Ethan's manipulation ran. He had turned not just my daughter against me, but his own mother, too. I think you should leave, Ethan said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. You're upsetting Mother. I stood my ground. I'm not going anywhere until we sort this out. Margaret, please, try to remember. I've always respected your things. It's Ethan who... Enough, Ethan shouted, his calm facade cracking. Mother doesn't need this stress. Sophie, take Grandma upstairs. As Sophie led a bewildered Margaret away, I turned on Ethan. What game are you playing? His eyes narrowed. Game? I'm protecting my family from a thief. We both know that's not true, I hissed. Why are you doing this? What are you hiding? For a split second I saw fear flicker in Ethan's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold anger. You're delusional, Amanda. Maybe you need professional help. The only help I need is a good lawyer, I retorted. You won't get away with this. Ethan laughed, a cruel sound that sent chills down my spine. Get away with what? Telling the truth? Face it, Amanda. No one will believe you over me. I'm the successful businessman. You're just a housewife with a history of accidents around valuable antiques. His words hit me like a physical blow. I realized then how carefully he had orchestrated this, how long he must have been planning it. But why? As I turned to leave, I caught sight of a letter on Margaret's desk. The logo at the top made my blood run cold. It was from the bank that handled Ethan's business accounts. Suddenly, pieces started falling into place. The missing antiques, Ethan's increasingly lavish spending, his desperation to discredit me. Was he in financial trouble? I walked out of the house, my mind whirling. Ethan thought he had won, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. I might be down, but I was far from out. It was time to start digging, to uncover what Ethan was really hiding. As I drove away, I made a silent vow. I would expose Ethan's lies, clear my name, and reclaim my life. The game was on, and I intended to win. I sat at Abby's kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and mulling over the events of the past few days. My sister bustled around, preparing breakfast and shooting concerned glances my way. Amanda, you need to eat something, she said, sliding a plate of toast in front of me. I shook my head. I can't. I keep thinking about Sophie. How could she turn on me like this? Abby sighed, taking the seat across from me. Honey, you've been blind to this for years. Ethan's been poisoning Sophie against you since she was little. What are you talking about? I asked, my defenses rising. Think about it, Abby pressed. Who always gave in to her every whim? Who never made her face consequences? Ethan's turned that girl into a spoiled princess, and you've let it happen. Her words stung, but deep down I knew she was right. I thought back to all the times Ethan had undermined my parenting, always playing the fun dad while I was left to be the disciplinarian. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Dad's taking me to Paris for the weekend. Thought you should know. I showed the message to Abby, my hands shaking. See? He's buying her loyalty with trips and gifts. Abby's eyes narrowed. Amanda, don't you think it's odd that Ethan's splurging on a Paris trip right after accusing you of theft? Where's this money coming from? Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Abby went to answer it, and I heard hushed voices in the hallway. A moment later, she returned with a stern-faced woman in a suit. Mrs. Thompson? The woman asked. I'm Linda Carson from Child Protective Services. We need to talk about your daughter, Sophie. My heart plummeted. What? Why? Linda sat down, her expression grave. We've received reports of potential emotional abuse and neglect. Given the recent accusations against you, we need to assess Sophie's living situation. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This is ridiculous. I've never abused Sophie. Ethan's the one who... Mrs. Thompson, Linda interrupted, please understand that we're just doing our job. We'll be conducting interviews with Sophie, your husband, and other family members. As Linda continued explaining the process, my mind raced. This had Ethan written all over it. He was using the system against me, painting me as an unfit mother. "Can I at least talk to Sophie?" I asked, my voice cracking. Linda shook her head. "I'm afraid that's not possible right now. We need to conduct our initial interviews without any potential influence." After Linda left, I collapsed into Abby's arms, sobbing. "He's taking everything from me, Abby. My home, my daughter, my reputation." Abby held me tight, her voice fierce. "Listen to me, Amanda. Ethan might think he's won, but he's underestimated you. It's time to fight back." I pulled away, wiping my eyes. "How? He holds all the cards." "Not all of them," Abby said, a glint in her eye. "Remember that letter you saw at Margaret's house? From the bank? I think it's time we did some digging into Ethan's finances." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. "You're right. If Ethan's hiding something, that's where we'll find it." As we started planning our next move, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Sophie. "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know what to believe anymore." I stared at the message, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Maybe all wasn't lost with Sophie after all. But I knew one thing for certain. I had to act fast. Ethan was playing a dangerous game, and it was time I learned the rules. I looked up at Abby, a new determination in my eyes. "Let's do this. It's time to uncover what Ethan's really hiding and save our family before it's too late." The familiar creak of the porch steps brought a rush of memories as I approached my childhood home. It had been years since I'd last visited, but desperate times called for desperate measures. My mother rose, opened the door before I could knock, her weathered face a mix of concern and love. "Amanda, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a tight embrace. "Abby called. I've been worried sick." I melted into her arms, feeling like a little girl again. "Oh, Mom, everything's falling apart." She ushered me inside, the scent of freshly baked cookies enveloping me like a warm blanket. As we sat at the kitchen table, I poured out the whole sordid story. Ethan's accusations, Sophie's betrayal, the CPS investigation. Mom listened intently, her brow furrowing with each new revelation. "That no-good son-in-law of mine," she muttered when I finished. "I always knew he was trouble." I sighed, cradling a mug of tea in my hands. "I should have seen it coming. How could I have been so blind?" Mom reached across the table, clasping my hand. "Now you listen here, Amanda. You are not to blame for Ethan's deceit, but it's high time you stood up for yourself." "But how?" I asked, feeling utterly defeated. "He's taken everything from me, my home, my daughter, my reputation." A steely glint appeared in Mom's eyes. "He hasn't taken your spirit, has he? You're a fighter, Amanda. Always have been. Remember when you were 10 and those bullies stole your bike?" I couldn't help but smile at the memory. I tracked them down and demanded it back. "Exactly," Mom nodded. "You didn't give up then, and you're not giving up now. Ethan might think he's won, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with." As we talked, a plan began to form. Mom suggested I reach out to her old friend, a retired detective named Frank, who might be able to help investigate Ethan's finances. She also reminded me of the importance of documenting everything. Every interaction, every accusation, every suspicious move Ethan made. "Knowledge is power, sweetheart," she said. "The more you know, the stronger your position." Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophie. "Mom, I'm scared. Dad's acting weird. Can we talk?" My heart raced. This could be my chance to reconnect with my daughter to help her see the truth. But what if it was a trap? "What should I do, Mom?" I asked, showing her the message. She squeezed my hand. "Trust your instincts, Amanda. You know your daughter. If she's reaching out, there must be a reason." Taking a deep breath, I typed out a reply. "Of course, sweetie. Name the time and place." As I hit send, a wave of determination washed over me. Mom was right. I was a fighter. And it was time to show Ethan exactly what I was made of. "I need to go back," I said, standing up. "I can't hide out here while Ethan destroys everything we've built." Mom nodded, a proud smile on her face. "That's my girl. But remember, you're not alone in this fight. Your family has your back." As I packed my bags, Mom's words of wisdom echoed in my mind. "Adversity doesn't build character, Amanda. It reveals it. And you, my dear, have character in spades." Hugging her goodbye, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan might have landed the first punch, but I was far from knocked out. It was time to gather evidence, reconnect with Sophie, and expose Ethan's lies. Driving away from my childhood home, I made a solemn vow. I would reclaim my life, clear my name, and show Sophie the truth about her father. The road ahead would be tough, but I was tougher. Ethan had no idea what was coming his way. The familiar jingle of the bell above the door of Ethan's Antiques sent a chill down my spine. I'd entered this shop countless times before, but never like this, a woman on a mission, determined to uncover the truth. Amanda? Marge, Ethan's longtime assistant, looked up from the counter, surprise etched on her face. I thought you were away. I forced a smile. Just stopping by to pick up some personal items, Marge. Is Ethan around? She shook her head. He's at an auction in Boston. Won't be back till tomorrow. Perfect. I made my way to the back office, my heart pounding. I had maybe an hour before Marge's curiosity got the better of her. Sitting at Ethan's desk, I booted up his computer. Thank God he'd never changed his password. Our wedding anniversary of all things. As I dug through the financial records, a pattern emerged. Large sums of money moving in and out of accounts I'd never seen before. Sales records for items I knew we'd never had in stock. And then I saw it. A transaction for an antique vase, matching the description of his mother's prized possession, sold to a private collector for an astronomical sum. My hands shook as I scribbled down account numbers and dates. This was it. Proof of Ethan's deception. But as I delved deeper, I realized it was just the tip of the iceberg. The business was hemorrhaging money, and Ethan was desperately trying to cover it up. Suddenly, the office door swung open. I looked up, expecting to see Marge, but instead found myself face to face with Sophie. Mom? Her eyes widened in shock. What are you doing here? I scrambled to close the files on the computer. Sophie, I can explain. Are you stealing from Dad? She accused, her voice rising. Is that why you're sneaking around? No, sweetie. It's not what you think, I pleaded, reaching for her. I'm trying to uncover the truth. Your father, he's been... Stop it, Sophie shouted, backing away. I don't want to hear your lies. I'm calling Dad. As she pulled out her phone, panic surged through me. If Ethan found out I'd been here, all my efforts would be for nothing. In a split-second decision, I grabbed Sophie's arm. Listen to me, I said urgently. Your father is not who you think he is. He's been lying to all of us, including your grandmother. I can prove it, but I need you to trust me. Sophie hesitated, her finger hovering over Ethan's number. Why should I believe you? Because I'm your mother, I said softly. And despite everything that's happened, I love you more than anything in this world. I would never lie to you, Sophie. Not about this. For a moment, we stood in tense silence. Then, slowly, Sophie lowered her phone. You have 5 minutes to explain. Relief washed over me. I quickly showed her the financial records, explaining the discrepancies and the suspicious transactions. As understanding dawned on her face, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But why would Dad do this? She asked, her voice small. I don't know, sweetheart, I admitted. But I intend to find out. Will you help me? Sophie bit her lip, conflict clear on her face. Then, with a determined nod, she said, What do you need me to do? In that moment, I felt a surge of hope. My daughter was back on my side. But I knew we weren't out of the woods yet. Ethan would return soon, and when he did, all hell would break loose. As we hurriedly copied files and gathered evidence, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. The stakes had never been higher. Not just for me, but for Sophie and the entire family. One thing was certain. There was no turning back now. The truth would come out, no matter the cost. My heart raced as I approached the sprawling mansion. This was it. The home of Ethan's wealthiest client, Richard Holloway. Sophie had overheard Ethan mentioning a special delivery here, and my gut told me this was where we'd find the missing antique. Are you sure about this, Mom? Sophie whispered beside me, her face pale with anxiety. I squeezed her hand. We have to know the truth, sweetheart, no matter what. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. A maid answered, eyeing us suspiciously. We're here to see Mr. Holloway, I said, mustering all the confidence I could. It's about an antique he recently acquired. Moments later, we were ushered into an opulent study. Richard Holloway, a distinguished man in his 60s, greeted us warmly. Ah, you must be from Ethan's Antiques, he said, smiling. I was expecting someone to check on the vase. Magnificent piece, isn't it? My breath caught in my throat as I spotted it. Margaret's prized antique vase, sitting proudly on a pedestal by the window. Actually, Mr. Holloway, I began, my voice shaking slightly, I'm Amanda Thompson, Ethan's wife. And this vase, it belongs to my mother-in-law. Richard's smile faltered. I'm afraid there must be some mistake. I purchased this vase legitimately from your husband's shop. No mistake, Sophie interjected, her voice stronger than I expected. That's my grandmother's vase. Dad had no right to sell it. As Richard's confusion grew, I quickly explained the situation, Ethan's accusations, the family turmoil, and our suspicions about the business's finances. Good Lord, Richard muttered, sinking into his chair. I had no idea. I've been doing business with Ethan for years. This is troubling. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Abby. Ethan's on his way to Holloway's. He knows you're there. Panic surged through me. Mr. Holloway, I hate to ask this, but could you please not mention our visit to my husband? We need time to gather more evidence. Richard nodded gravely. Of course, this is a serious matter. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. As we hurried out, I saw Ethan's car turning into the driveway. Quick, Sophie, I hissed, pulling her behind a hedge. We watched as Ethan strode up to the house, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Through the open study window, we could hear snippets of his conversation with Richard. Misunderstanding, my wife is unstable, custody battle. My blood boiled at Ethan's lies, but Sophie's grip on my arm tightened. Not yet, Mom, she whispered. We need more proof. She was right, of course, but hearing Ethan spin his web of deceit made me realize just how far he was willing to go to protect himself. As we snuck away, I knew we were racing against time. Ethan would soon realize we'd been there, and he'd stop at nothing to discredit us. What now? Sophie asked as we drove away, her voice trembling. I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. We need to move fast. We'll go to the police, show them the financial records, tell them about the vase. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Margaret, Ethan's mother. Amanda? Her frail voice quavered. Ethan says you've stolen from me. He wants to put me in a home. Please, what's going on? My heart sank. Ethan was making his move, isolating Margaret to keep her quiet. Don't worry, I assured her, though fear gnawed at my insides. I'm coming to get you. Everything will be all right. As I ended the call, I realized the true extent of Ethan's manipulation. He wasn't just trying to frame me. He was systematically destroying every relationship I had, every support system I could turn to. I looked at Sophie, saw the fear and determination in her eyes, and made a decision. Change of plans, I said, making a sharp U-turn. We're getting your grandmother. It's time to end this, once and for all. As we raced towards Margaret's house, I knew we were hurtling towards a confrontation that would change everything. But I was done being a victim. It was time to fight back, to reclaim my life and protect my family. Whatever Ethan had planned, he was about to learn that he'd underestimated me for the last time. We burst through the door of Margaret's house, finding her in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Her eyes, wide with confusion and fear, met mine. Amanda? Sophie? What's happening? She asked, her voice trembling. We're getting you out of here, Margaret, I said, rushing to her side. Ethan's been lying to all of us. Sophie started gathering Margaret's essentials while I quickly explained the situation. Margaret's face crumpled as the truth sank in. My own son, how could he? She whispered. Just then, we heard the screech of tires outside. Ethan had arrived. Quick, out the back, I urged, helping Margaret to her feet. We were halfway across the backyard when Ethan's voice boomed behind us. Stop right there! We turned to face him, his face contorted with rage. What do you think you're doing, Amanda? Kidnapping my mother now? Enough, Ethan, I shouted, my fear transforming into anger. We know everything. The embezzlement, selling your mother's antiques, framing me. It's over. Ethan's eyes darted between us, calculating his next move. You have no proof, he sneered. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected businessman or the unstable wife? They'll believe the truth, Sophie interjected, stepping forward. I've seen the evidence, Dad. How could you do this to us, to Grandma? For a moment, Ethan's mask slipped, revealing a flicker of shame, but it quickly hardened into defiance. You don't understand. The business was failing. I had to do something. By stealing from your own mother? Margaret's voice was quiet but firm. By destroying your family? Ethan's composure cracked. I never meant for it to go this far. The first sale was just to cover a small debt, but then it spiraled. I couldn't stop. As Ethan's confession poured out, I felt a mix of vindication and sorrow. This man I'd loved, the father of my child, had betrayed us all so completely. It's not too late to make this right, Ethan, I said, softening my tone. Turn yourself in. We can work through this as a family. For a moment, hope flickered in his eyes. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, grabbing Margaret's arm. No, I won't let you ruin everything I've built. Let her go, Ethan! I screamed, fear gripping my heart as Margaret stumbled. Sophie rushed to her grandmother's aid, while I faced off against my husband. In his eyes, I saw desperation, the cornered look of a man with nothing left to lose. Think about what you're doing, I pleaded, inching closer. This isn't you, Ethan. Remember the man I fell in love with, the father Sophie adores. He's still in there somewhere. Ethan's grip on Margaret loosened slightly. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, his voice breaking. Just then, police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone, probably a neighbor, had called them. It's over, Dad, Sophie said gently, supporting Margaret. Please don't make this worse. As the police cars pulled up, Ethan's shoulders sagged in defeat. He released Margaret and slumped to the ground, burying his face in his hands. While the officers took Ethan into custody, I held Margaret and Sophie close. We'd won, but the victory felt hollow. Our family was irrevocably changed. As we watched Ethan being driven away, Sophie turned to me, tears in her eyes. What happens now, Mom? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on us. I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll face it together, one day at a time. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with legal battles, emotional healing, and rebuilding trust. But as I stood there with my daughter and mother-in-law, I felt a glimmer of hope. We'd survived the worst of the storm. Now it was time to pick up the pieces and start anew. 6 months after Ethan's arrest, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my blazer. Today was the final day of his trial, and I was determined to face it with the strength I'd discovered within myself. Mom, Sophie's voice called from downstairs. Are you ready? I took a deep breath. Coming, sweetie. As we drove to the courthouse, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. The initial shock of Ethan's betrayal had given way to a steely resolve. Sophie, once Daddy's little girl, had matured beyond her years, standing by my side through it all. The courtroom was packed as we entered. I caught sight of Margaret, frail but determined, sitting with my sister Abby. As the judge called the court to order, I felt Sophie's hand slip into mine. Ethan's eyes met mine as he was led in. Gone was the arrogant businessman I'd known. In his place sat a broken man, the weight of his actions evident in the slump of his shoulders. As the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, a collective sigh seemed to ripple through the room. It was over. Finally, truly over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Mrs. Thompson, how do you feel about the verdict? One shouted. I paused, considering my words carefully. Today isn't about winning or losing. It's about truth and accountability. My family has been through hell, but we're survivors. We'll heal, and we'll move forward. Later that evening, as Sophie, Margaret, Abby, and I sat around the dinner table in our new home, a sense of peace settled over me. It wasn't perfect. Margaret still had moments of confusion, and Sophie was in therapy to work through her trust issues. But we were together, supporting each other. I have something for you, Margaret said, her eyes twinkling as she handed me a small box. Inside was a delicate silver locket. It's beautiful, I gasped. Open it, she urged. I did, and found a photograph inside. Me, Sophie, and Margaret, taken just last week. On the other side was engraved, "Family is love, not blood." Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at these 3 incredible women. My daughter, who'd shown such courage in facing the truth about her father. My sister, who'd stood by me when I had nothing. And Margaret, who'd chosen to embrace me as a daughter, despite everything. I know it's been a hard road, Margaret said, her voice quavering slightly. But I want you to know, Amanda, that you've shown us all what true strength looks like. You didn't just survive, you helped us all find a way forward. Sophie nodded, squeezing my hand. Mom, I'm so sorry for doubting you. You've taught me what real integrity means. Oh, sweetie, I pulled her close. We've all learned so much, and we'll keep learning together. As the evening wore on, filled with laughter and shared memories, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path ahead wasn't clear. We still had financial challenges to face and emotional scars to heal, but I knew we'd face it as a family. Later, as I stood on the back porch, gazing at the stars, Abby joined me. Penny for your thoughts, sis? I smiled, fingering the locket around my neck. I was just thinking, for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. It's like I can breathe again. Abby nudged my shoulder. You know, when this all started, I was so worried about you. But watching you stand up for yourself, fight for the truth, I've never been prouder to call you my sister. As we hugged, I realized that this journey, painful as it had been, had given me something precious, a deeper understanding of my own strength and the unbreakable bonds of true family. The road ahead would have its challenges, but I was ready to face them. With Sophie, Margaret, and Abby by my side, I knew that whatever life threw our way, we'd face it together, stronger, wiser, and filled with love. As I closed the porch door and rejoined my family inside, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, and I couldn't wait to see what the future held for us all.